They were weaponizing the garden. The Central Intelligence Agency didn't just plant spies during the Cold War. They planted genetically engineered seeds, creating everything from stealth crops for deep cover agents to terrifying fungal weapons. Prepare to dig into the bizarre, untold history of Project MK Flora and the most powerful tool in the global arsenal, a miracle grain. The Green Mandate, seeds as Cold War espionage. The Cold War wasn't just fought with missiles, tanks, and hidden spies. It was also fought in the soil. In the 1950s, the Central Intelligence Agency launched a secretive initiative, codenamed Project MK Flora, to weaponize the most fundamental element of global stability, food. This wasn't about espionage by wiretap. It was about weaponizing agriculture itself. The power to control a nation's harvest meant the power to control its destiny, and the CIA knew it. The core idea, known internally as the Green Mandate, was simple. Well-fed populations were stable populations. The CIA quickly began recruiting botanists and agricultural specialists from major universities, often hiding their work beneath layers of grant funding that appeared to be humanitarian aid or environmental research. Their focus wasn't just on creating resilient American crops, but on engineering new, revolutionary food sources that could dramatically increase yield in target countries. This was less about simple charity and more about geopolitical influence. By giving a struggling nation a miracle strain of corn or wheat, the agency could secure loyalty and cut off Soviet influence, creating an agricultural firewall across the globe. They were determined to make sure the Soviet Union could never use famine as a political lever, by ensuring American-backed fields were always bursting with life. This era saw the first covert recognition that a genetically engineered seed could be a more powerful diplomatic tool than a signed treaty. But not all of their experiments were designed for benevolence. Some were aimed at the very opposite: the radium garden. Mutation. Breeding in the atomic age. Deep in the American Southwest, a bizarre facility housed a garden where the sun wasn't the primary source of power. Here, scientists exposed common food crops to controlled bursts of radiation, attempting to force evolution at an unnerving speed. This was mutation breeding in the atomic age, and the CIA saw it as the ultimate shortcut to agricultural superiority. The project utilized dedicated structures known as gamma fields, where sources like cobalt-60 were used to bathe seeds and young plants in low levels of gamma rays. The goal was to deliberately scramble the plant's deoxyribonucleic acid, or DNA, inducing hundreds of random, unpredictable genetic changes in the hope that one or two would result in a super-resilient strain. They were searching for crops like wheat or corn that could grow in extreme drought, resist newly engineered biological pests, or thrive in nutrient-poor Soviet bloc soil. It was mad science executed with rigorous government funding. The methods were crude, yielding far more non-viable, bizarre growths than usable strains. But the few successes, like creating disease-resistant pear varieties, justified the program's continued existence. They were treating nature like a slot machine, spinning the reels of genetics with deadly radioactive dice. After gambling with radiation, how would the Central Intelligence Agency provide a spy with a perfect, untraceable meal when they were 1,000 miles from a grocery store? The answer was planted in the dirt: the zero-signature potato. A spy's most essential need isn't a silent pistol or a coded transmission, but silent food. The Central Intelligence Agency realized that a deep cover agent operating for months in a remote, hostile territory couldn't rely on local markets. They needed a staple crop that could be grown quickly, hidden easily, and provide maximum caloric yield: the zero-signature potato. The project criteria were extremely demanding. The target vegetable had to possess compact growth, rapid maturity, and the crucial ability to thrive in extremely poor, rocky, or chemically hostile soil without requiring specialized fertilizer. To achieve this, scientists at a classified agricultural facility began crossbreeding standard North American potato varieties with ancient high-yield Andean potato strains. These ancestral varieties had already evolved over thousands of years to survive in harsh mountain climates, providing a perfect genetic base. This wasn't a cheap lab project. The Central Intelligence Agency poured resources into dozens of field tests, crossbreeding trials, and specialized soil analysis. spending what would be $20 million today just to ensure an agent could grow a reliable, single-serving harvest. The resulting engineered hybrid was intended to be a stealth crop, planted in a small, discrete plot, and harvested with minimal effort, providing a high-calorie, nutritious ration to sustain agents indefinitely. It was a strange, yet entirely practical mission, the world's greatest spy agency dedicating time and millions of dollars to the humble root vegetable. But while some programs aimed to feed the world, another was designed to starve a rival, Operation Tropical Rot, the fungus weapon. Not all seed experiments sponsored by the Central Intelligence Agency were focused on creating life. Some were designed for widespread termination. One chilling initiative studied how to weaponize common fungal spores and target a specific economically vital enemy crop, giving it the unnerving codename Operation Tropical Rot. The agency recognized that the complete loss of a major cash crop could destabilize a hostile regime faster than any conventional military action. The research focused intensely on pathogenic seed deployment, a form of offensive biological warfare research. Scientists isolated and engineered highly virulent strains of rust and blight, aiming to create a fungus that was highly contagious yet ideally geographically contained, ensuring the effects didn't spread to American allied fields. The primary target often centered on high-value Soviet-backed crops like sugarcane or major rice fields in Southeast Asia. This required meticulous testing to ensure the virulence was maximized without being uncontrollable. They were designing an invisible agricultural bomb, disguised in the very air the target plants breathed. It was an ambitious, frightening project that demonstrated the lengths to which Cold War rivals would go to gain an upper hand. They had designed an invisible agricultural bomb. But how do you hide the bomb testing facility itself? The agency decided to grow a cover story, the camouflage alfalfa hoax, instant ground cover. After an embarrassing exposure of a remote test site, the Central Intelligence Agency needed a solution that was instantaneous, cheap, and natural, a camouflage that grew itself. The answer came in the form of a hyper-aggressive, drought-resistant field crop, nicknamed the camouflage alfalfa hoax. The agency realized that painting concrete or draping netting was slow and often drew unwanted attention. What they needed was a plant with rapid aggressive growth, capable of sprouting and creating dense cover in a matter of days, even in chemically altered or hostile desert soil. Scientists focused on supercharging the genetics of alfalfa, a common, hardy forage crop, crossbreeding it for extreme drought resistance and quick germination. The resulting hybrid was used to instantly hide sensitive areas, often covering decommissioned missile silos, covert airfields, or temporary staging operations in desolate areas. If a surveillance plane flew over a patch of desert one week, the next it would see a convincing field of green, allowing the agency to easily hide or move equipment. It was a purely defensive move that turned the principles of farming into the art of deception. But other projects sought to turn the plant itself into an active part of the intelligence network. The silent listener. Plants as biochemical alarms. Long before digital sensors and complex electronics, the Central Intelligence Agency considered using biology itself as a detection tool. Scientists investigated genetically modifying common plants to react visually, changing color or drooping, when they absorbed trace elements of specific explosive compounds, turning a simple garden into the silent listener. This concept of phytodetection aimed to solve a critical problem for field agents, detecting hidden caches of arms, drugs, or even nerve agents without specialized equipment. Researchers worked to link a plant's natural nutrient absorption pathways to a visually observable change, such as the production of a bright pigment or the rapid wilting of a leaf. If a plant was watered with contaminated groundwater or grew near a buried stockpile of trinitrotoluene, or TNT, the plant would essentially shout the location of the target by changing from green to a vivid shade of blue or red. The difficulty was immense, requiring the engineered plants to have an extremely high sensitivity for the trace compounds, while also ensuring the visual change was distinct and reliable for an agent in the field. This represented the furthest reaches of the program, a dream of turning the entire landscape into a decentralized, living intelligence network. Although it was never fully operational, the idea solidified that the Cold War could be fought with flowers just as easily as with firearms. The vaults of life, securing the genetic high ground. Global seed banks, often seen as scientific archives, were viewed by the Central Intelligence Agency as the ultimate strategic asset. They contained the genetic blueprint for human survival, and protecting them, or perhaps seizing them, became a high-stakes intelligence objective known as the Vaults of Life. The agency understood that control over the planet's genetic diversity meant control over the future food supply. In the event of a catastrophic nuclear war or a deliberate global crop failure, the nations that controlled the most diverse and resilient seed stock would be the only ones capable of rebuilding their agriculture. The CIA conducted extensive vulnerability assessments on major international seed repositories, including facilities like the one on Svalbard, determining how they could be either infiltrated or secured. There was a genuine, pervasive fear that the Soviets might develop a genetic marker of sterility that could target and neutralize a rival's grain or introduce a destructive pathogen into its core seed stocks. They feared the Soviets weren't trying to cause mass crop demise, but rather introduce a silent genetic marker that would cause a gradual generational decline in yield, or even render the next season's seeds completely sterile. A delayed action agricultural genocide. The contingency plans detailed how American agents would rapidly secure key genetic lines of wheat, rice, and maize, storing them in classified, hardened bunkers. This was a silent, escalating battle for the future of food, fought not with gunfire, but with frozen packets of deoxyribonucleic acid. However, a more immediate threat emerged in the form of a deadly agricultural plague, prompting a desperate defensive race. Red Shield, the race against the global wheat plague. A deadly strain of wheat rust known as UG99 threatened to destroy the world's supply, and the Central Intelligence Agency saw it not just as a natural disaster, but as a potential biological attack by the Soviet bloc. The race was on to build a shield from seeds, codenamed Red Shield. This was pure, desperate defense, a crash program to save the backbone of the American food supply. The agency directed an unprecedented amount of funding and resources toward obscure United States Department of Agriculture research facilities, bypassing bureaucratic red tape. The mission was to identify, isolate, and introduce disease resistance into the entire national grain reserve at an impossible speed. Scientists worked frantically, crossbreeding existing resilient wheat lines with wild grasses and ancient grain varieties, attempting to outmaneuver the epidemic. The problem was that the rust could mutate quickly, meaning any solution they developed had a short shelf life. It was an intelligence operation fought in laboratories and fields where genetic markers were more critical than code words, and success meant the difference between a thriving nation and a widespread food crisis. Red Shield ultimately slowed the plague, but the threat demonstrated how agricultural vulnerability was a massive gap in national security. The threat demonstrated that American agents were completely exposed. To operate in the field for 72 hours straight, they needed a new kind of power, a botanical stimulant that could be grown in a jungle and keep them awake for days. Operation Hyperbeam. The quest for field-grade stimulants. Field agents needed to stay alert for days on end, maintaining peak performance without the risk of carrying highly traceable chemical stimulants. The Central Intelligence Agency sought a natural, growable solution, an ultra-potent crossbreed of high-alkaloid plants known as Operation Hyperbeam. They needed a sustainable, powerful energy source that could be consumed as a compact, fast-acting field ration. The research focused on crossbreeding aggressive, high-caffeine sources, primarily high-altitude coffee with South American plants like yerba mate and guarana. The goal was to create a hybrid seed that, once grown, would yield a raw product with 4 or 5 times the stimulant strength of standard coffee beans. The challenge was immense, stabilizing a hybrid that delivered the necessary extreme stimulant effect without also introducing toxic side effects or a crash that would render the agent useless. The plant had to be reliable, providing consistent energy when an agent might be operating for 72 hours straight with no rest. The resulting seeds were packed into survival kits, ready to be grown in discrete jungle plots or processed into concentrated paste. It was the ultimate biological power-up, engineered not in a lab but in a garden, Yet, even with all their engineering prowess, some experiments went wildly, beautifully wrong. The unintended heirloom. Bizarre results of failure. Not every experiment yielded a superweapon or a geopolitical victory. Sometimes, they created beautiful, monstrous failures. In one archived folder detailing the fringe results of Project MK Flora, a report outlines a plant engineered for rapid, massive growth that instead produced a strange, bioluminescent head of lettuce. These were the accidents of Cold War botany, the unintended heirlooms. Scientists attempting to create crops that could thrive with zero sunlight, perhaps for future deep bunker growing, cross-pollinated common lettuce with deep-sea bioluminescent algae. The aim was to use a plant's natural light as its own engine. Instead of a robust, efficient food source, the resulting hybrid was a massive, bland failure. A vegetable that glowed faintly green and blue in the dark, but was entirely inedible. Other failures included a huge pumpkin, genetically enhanced to survive the extreme cold of the Arctic Circle, that grew large enough to feed 12 people but tasted overwhelmingly of water. These bizarre, commercially useless, and often slightly unsettling hybrids were never destroyed. Instead, they were meticulously documented as genetic dead ends, filed away in government archives and forgotten, a strange testament to the ambition of the program. Yet, even as they failed with glow-in-the-dark food, the CIA was exploring the use of exotic plants for a much darker purpose: temporary incapacitation. The sleepy flower, chemical warfare from the Amazon. During conflicts in dense jungle environments, the application of lethal force was often impractical and politically undesirable. This led the Central Intelligence Agency to pursue non-lethal incapacitation, researching how to weaponize nature itself, culminating in the chilling project known as the Sleepy Flower. The idea was to create chemical warfare from the Amazon. Scientists focused their efforts on analyzing and synthesizing natural sedative compounds found in indigenous tropical flora. The CIA trawled the Amazonian basin, hunting for indigenous secrets, ultimately focusing on the powerful sedative qualities of certain Datura species, known historically as Devil's Trumpet, and then extracting and amplifying its compounds 10 times over. The goal was to enhance these compounds and develop a delivery method that could quickly pacify hostile groups, or even quiet guard dogs, without leaving any lasting forensic signature. The engineers worked to create a highly concentrated liquid or an aerosolized seed dust that could be released discreetly. The target substance had to be fast-acting and capable of inducing a state of deep, temporary sleep, allowing American assets to slip in and out of secured areas undetected. This blurred the line between intelligence gathering and chemical warfare, exploiting the plant kingdom's natural defense mechanisms for human conflict. It was an ethically ambiguous but strategically appealing weapon, showcasing the agency's dedication to exploiting every corner of the natural world, including the most secure military complexes, the hidden hothouse, botanical wing of Fort Detrick. Fort Detrick is famous for its biological weapons programs and the dark history of its labs, but few know about the specialized, heavily guarded greenhouses hidden within its complex. This was the botanical wing, the high-security, laboratory floor where the Central Intelligence Agency's most sensitive exotic seed experiments were cultivated. Within these structures, extreme climate control systems maintained impossible environments, desert heat next to Arctic chill, all within 50 feet of each other. The facility was designed with layers of security doors and airlocks to prevent contamination and, more importantly, to prevent the escape of any engineered plant life. Researchers cultivated the vast, diverse collection of plants, from the zero-signature potato to the hyper bean, behind generic labels that gave no hint of their true, dangerous purpose. The scientists working here were often completely compartmentalized, aware only of the small piece of the puzzle they were working on. They were growing weaponized gardens under bright fluorescent lights, isolating genes that could either feed a nation or destroy its primary food source. It was a terrifying merging of agriculture and national security, proving that the deepest secrets of the Cold War were sometimes green and growing. But as the American side engineered their seeds, the Soviet Union was developing its own countermeasures. The ghost crop, KGB counter-espionage in the soil. The United States wasn't alone in this silent war of the soil. The KGB, paranoid about the possibility of American seed sabotage, poured vast resources into a counter-espionage program, checking every foreign seed sample and developing its own defenses. They called their ultimate agricultural safeguard the ghost crop. The Soviet strategy focused entirely on defensive science. Institutes like the highly respected Vavilov Institute in Moscow were tasked with breeding ultra-hardy, purely Soviet cultivars that would be naturally immune to Western genetic tampering or engineered pathogens. Their goal was to create ghost crops, strains of grains so resilient and genetically distinct that a foreign biological agent designed to target American or European wheat would simply bypass the Soviet fields. This required an enormous secretive effort to collect, categorize, and crossbreed millions of local Russian and Eastern European heirloom varieties, reinforcing their inherent resistance. They weren't just breeding crops for yield. They were breeding them for survival against an invisible, engineered enemy. This deep-seated fear of seed sabotage underscored the fact that agriculture had truly become a zero-sum game during the Cold War. But sometimes, the Central Intelligence Agency's aggressive research yielded surprising and even positive global benefits. The humanitarian veil. The CIA's drought-proof mission. Some of the most valuable advances from the Central Intelligence Agency's Cold War seed program were purely humanitarian, though they served a powerful dual purpose: stabilizing hostile regions through aid. This effort, often operating behind the humanitarian veil, focused on developing a revolutionary strain of drought-proof grain that could survive multi-year dry spells. While the primary goal of the Green Mandate was geopolitical influence, creating food security was an effective way to stop the spread of Soviet ideology in Africa and Asia. The research concentrated on breeding ancient hardy grains like sorghum and millet to maximize their resistance to desiccation and heat stress. The resulting super drought-resistant grain varieties were capable of producing reliable yields in climates where previous harvests had utterly failed. These seeds were then subtly deployed through organizations like the United States Agency for International Development, or USAID, and other neutral charitable fronts. The agency ensured that American-developed seeds were the lifeblood of regions susceptible to famine, securing goodwill and establishing influence without firing a single shot. This was a form of soft power, using science to stabilize chaos, but the secrets of that science remain hidden to this day. The Sleeping Archive: What Remains of MK Flora. Today, most of Project MK Flora remains highly classified, but quiet document releases hint at the bizarre scale of the Cold War's secret botanical ambition. The documents confirm that the program ended not in failure, but in deep storage, leaving behind the sleeping archive of highly engineered seeds. When the funding dried up and the intense rivalry of the 1960s cooled slightly, the Central Intelligence Agency didn't destroy their vast collection of bizarre, experimental grains. Instead, hundreds of thousands of individual seed packets, from the high-caffeine hyperbean to the disease-proof wheat, were meticulously cataloged and placed into cryogenic storage in hardened government facilities. These seeds, filed away in high-security freezers, represent a massive library of unique, engineered genetic information, waiting for a key to unlock them. The belief was that while the political need for MK Flora had diminished, the science was too valuable to discard. In the event of a future global catastrophe, a new plague, or a massive climate shift, these seeds could be reactivated, providing an emergency toolkit for rebuilding agriculture. The legacy of the Cold War, therefore, isn't just rusting missiles. It's also a frozen vault of weaponized botany waiting silently beneath the surface. The secrets of Project MK Flora are still waiting in frozen vaults, ready for a crisis. If you were shocked by the bizarre history of these Cold War seeds, let us know in the comments, and be sure to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive into hidden history.